Well, college football season is coming to a close. That's unfortunate because not only do I love college football, but we've had some success betting on college football this season. Another winning week last week, won 3 out of our 4 bets. That puts us at 21-13 on the year. 3 games I'm having to play on this week. Lines have not yet been released on BETDAQ, but I spoke with the traders just before I made this video, and they tipped me as to what the lines are going to be. So I'm pretty sure these lines are going to be accurate, even though they're not up yet on the site as of this recording. Now, this is conference championship week in college football. The conferences that do have championship games will be playing those games. Of course, the Big 12, for instance, no longer plays a championship game, so they do have a full slate of games. And 2 of the games I'm having to bet on this week are conference championship games. The other is a Big 12 game, and let's start with that one. The Texas Longhorns going on the road to take on Kansas State. Kansas State is going to be installed as a 10.5-point favorite in this game on BETDAQ, and I like them to cover that number. Listen, I know Texas is the name program here. I know that most of the guys on Kansas State's roster, if they were offered scholarships to Texas coming out of high school, they would be playing for Texas right now. That does not change the fact that Kansas State is just clearly better than Texas this season. Really, they're better on both sides of the ball, but the matchup that gives me the most confidence here is this Kansas State offense versus the Texas defense. Texas has had a terrible defense this season. It's the main reason they've lost 3 games. Against the 3 best offenses in the Big 12, Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, and Baylor, Texas has given up an average of 49.7 points per game. 50 points per game to those 3 teams. Guess who the 4th best offense in the Big 12 is? Kansas State. And to be honest with you, I think the Texas defense might match up even worse with Kansas State than they do with some of these other offenses, because Texas's main problem on defense is not that they lack the athleticism to match up with these spread offenses. It's that they can't tackle. They've had real trouble tackling all season. And Kansas State, with Colin Klein and this spread option-based attack, you better be able to tackle against this team. We've seen Kansas State against teams this season who've struggled to tackle. The Miami game comes to mind. They run right through teams like that, and I think they're going to run right through this Texas defense on Saturday. Texas starting a new quarterback in this game, Case McCoy. Remember, David Ash, even though McCoy's got some playing time this year, David Ash has been the starter throughout the year. And Ash is banged up now, but I don't think it's injury. I don't think injury is the primary reason for his demotion. He's been playing worse and worse throughout the season. He looked awful in Texas's last game, a loss to TCU. So Case McCoy gets the start on the road in Manhattan, senior day for Kansas State, coming off a bitter loss to Baylor. Remember, they were number 1 in the country before they lost to Baylor. They've had a bye week to lick their wounds. This will be the last time these seniors get to play in front of their home crowd. I think Kansas State is going to blow out Texas in this game. I like them minus 10.5 on Saturday. Next game I want to get to, the ACC championship game. Florida State, currently installed as a 14-point favorite over Georgia Tech. The fact that Georgia Tech is playing in the conference championship game tells you all you need to know about the ACC this year. Georgia Tech is 6-6. This is the worst ACC that I've seen in 30 years. I've only been alive for 30 years, so I guess it's the worst ACC in my lifetime. Florida State's been an overrated team all year. They lost their 2nd game of the season last week to Florida. The only reason, in my opinion, the only reason they didn't lose more games is because they didn't play any more good teams. Their best win of the season has been against Clemson, a Clemson team that is looking kind of shaky themselves after getting beat handily at home by South Carolina last week. Clemson doesn't have any good wins on the schedule. Florida State doesn't have any good wins on their schedule aside from Clemson. And, I guess you can't blame either one of these teams because there are no good teams in the ACC. Florida State, they lost to NC State. They almost lost to a terrible Virginia Tech team. Here they face Georgia Tech, and Georgia Tech has had one of the worst defenses in major college football this season, but I like Georgia Tech plus 14 in this game. Listen, anytime you're going to give me a Paul Johnson team and give me 2 touchdowns or more, I will jump all over this because of the style offense they run. Georgia Tech, of course, runs that triple option. They might not pass the ball 10 times this entire game. They're 7-2 against the spread under Paul Johnson. The 9 times they've been underdogs of 6 or more. That's because this offense is very difficult to stop. Teams just aren't used to it. They don't see offenses like this every week. This will be the first triple option team that Florida State has faced this season. And so the offense works, even when they don't score a whole lot of points. They eat up clock, they pick up first downs, they keep the opposing offense off the field, and I think that's exactly what they're going to do in this game on Saturday night. Now, do I think the Georgia Tech defense is going to have much trouble or much success slowing down the Florida State offense? No, because they haven't had much success slowing down anybody. But I think Georgia Tech is going to put up some points in this game. I think we're going to see a back-and-forth game here throughout most of the game. I do expect Florida State to pull away and win this one eventually. But I think 14 points is too many. I like Georgia Tech plus 14 in this game, and I do believe 14 is going to be the line on BETDAQ. It's been moving between 13 and 14 all week out in Vegas. That, as I said, spoke to the BETDAQ traders before we went on the air here, and they told me it's going to be 14. So I like Georgia Tech plus 14 against Florida State. Look for Florida State to win that game, but I think it's going to be closer than most people anticipate. My final bet of the day, the big game. 4 o'clock, at least 4 o'clock here, maybe 9 o'clock where you're watching it. The SEC championship game, a de facto national semifinal. The winner of this game will play Notre Dame for the national championship. Alabama is going to be installed as a 7.5-point favorite over Georgia on BETDAQ. And I like the Tide here. I like Alabama to cover 7.5. I know giving more than a touchdown in a spot like this might make you a little squeamish, but I think Georgia is a little bit overrated. I just do not think they're as good a team as Alabama. Seen both these teams play several times this year, and I have not been impressed with Georgia. As a matter of fact, the only reason they won the SEC East, I believe, was because of their schedule. I do not believe Georgia was the best team in the SEC East. I do not believe they were as good as South Carolina. And even though they beat Florida, that was a fluky game. The Gators turned the ball over 6 times. Georgia, they've only played two good teams this entire season. I mean, you think because they play in the SEC, well, they must have played a tough schedule. That's not the case. Georgia, due to luck of the draw, they avoided the 4 best teams in the SEC West. They did not have to play Alabama, LSU, Texas A&M, or Mississippi State this season. The only 2 good teams they've played all year have been South Carolina and Florida, and they've split those games. They were beaten handily by South Carolina. They squeaked by Florida. We mentioned the Gators turned them all over 6 times in those games. Georgia's next best win this season, Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt is their next best win this season. I don't believe they're as good as their record would indicate, and I believe Alabama is as good as their record would indicate. I think this team received a wake-up call, maybe a needed wake-up call. These are young guys. They might have been reading their own press clippings. Well, they received a wake-up call with that loss to Texas A&M a couple of weeks ago. Just went and blew Auburn off the field in the Iron Bowl last week. Don't expect to see something that lopsided here in the SEC title game, but I do think they're going to beat Georgia. I think they're going to beat Georgia relatively handily. I look for a 10 to 17-point margin of victory here. I like Alabama minus 7.5. So there you have it. Those are my 3 college football games this weekend. I like Kansas State minus 10.5. I like Georgia Tech plus 14, and I like Alabama minus 7.5. I wish you best of luck this week, and whatever you decide to do, just so long as your interests don't conflict with my interests.